My name is Clancy Imislund. I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here tonight. I was telling someone at the break that 11 o'clock this morning I was having breakfast or late brunch in West Virginia. I had a little bite to eat in Chicago, and I got here and conducted a birthday party for a person I sponsor his 20th birthday this afternoon. And now I'm here, and many times along the way I've wanted to stop and just lie down and go to sleep, but I know that you needed me. So. I hesitate to say this. I hate to waste the 3 or 4 minutes, but I must do this every once in a while when I come to the Marina Center. About 30 years ago in the San Fernando Valley, there was an old guy named Bill, and he was a Bill W. His name was, not Bill Wilson, and he was a kind of a headstrong, crotchety old fool, and one of his obsessions was that he felt that everybody in AA should be anonymous. I mean, really anonymous. We're going to work on anonymity right after the meeting. Anonymity. It's okay. I knew that there was something up when I saw both earrings in the same ear. But anyway, but he felt everyone should be anonymous, and what he would do to show this, I mean anonymous to each other, when they read the traditions, he would whisper along with them. He'd say, "Hear that? Principles before personalities." They'd say, "Oh, shut up, Bill. I'm not going to shut up. Needs to be said." And this went on for a while, and then 3 or 4 young guys, one of whom I knew well, who told me about it, they would join in to mock Bill. And he'd say, "Principles before personalities." They'd say, "Principles before personalities. Is that right, Bill?" He said, "Shut up. I'm not going to shut up." Yeah. And this went on for a while. And then some goof from Cedars, one of the Cedros, Sylvan and Cedros meeting came by and heard this and thought it was some sort of a spiritual breakthrough. So he took it back to the Sylvan and Cedros group, and they started saying, "Principles before personalities." Nobody ever knew why. And for about 20 years, at least 20 years, in the San Fernando Valley, there were 4 meetings in the middle of the valley. When you go out there to speak, they always were known as the choir or the chanters, or whoever they're going to go out and speak for the chanters tonight. "Principles before personalities." That is kind of funny. Gives you at least someone to feel superior to. And then somehow the cork got out of the bottle, and the bacilli got in the wind and blew around. And pretty soon you got more and more meetings in this area, nowhere else in the world. Principles before personalities. Not one person, and you all said it tonight, not one of you knew why. You just said it. Principles before personalities. And then it got expanded to the end of chapter 5. God couldn't would have saw it. They probably would do it at the end of the promises if they knew what they were. And it's really gotten to such a stage that in the meeting they started, it started in 30 years ago, part of the format now the secretary asked people to not chant. It has nothing to do with AA. It really has nothing to do with AA. It's not done anywhere. It's done as kind of just a smart aleck thing to do. It is, now some of you have been sober quite a while, and if you've been sober, 7, 8, 9 months, you probably got it so fixed in your system you can't shake it. But those who are new, who are still, who are pliable enough to be formed into the paths of righteousness, let me just say that, I sit in a meeting on Wednesday night with 1,000 people, and nobody says nothing, and we all stay sober somehow. If you want to say it, it's all right, but if you do say it, you're doing nothing for AA. All you're doing it as a distraction to the people around you. You are merely mocking Bill W. from the Canoga Park meeting in 1969. All right? That takes care of that. Now, the next item. I wish you'd left your notes up here, Carolyn. I could use something now. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be sober. I was thinking tonight as I was listening to Carolyn talk, a very fine talk. This is a strange place, Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's always kind of strange when you're new and when you're kind of stumbling around or when you're having difficulty, because there's so many people seem to have answers to alcoholism that don't go to AA or found a way out. And over the years, I really spent a lot of time working on it, thinking about it, and talking to knowledgeable people. And I'll tell you, it boils down to this, really. There are basically, I would say, in my opinion, 3 types of alcoholism. There may be more, but I know of 3 basic types that are familiar to the investigative mind. And one is, there's a type of alcoholism where people, to all intents and purposes, drink and are caught up in drinking, and what happens is something dramatic happens. A death in the family, some terrible thing, some cataclysm, some weeping baby begs them, and they stop. And they stay stopped. And a lot of people like me have had people like that set up to them as, why can't you be like my mother's Uncle Leo? Got sober that way after a terrible car accident in 1924. And he went to church, and they said, why can't you be like Uncle Leo? He stopped drinking in 1924. Why do you drink like that? And I could never think of an answer. I'd look at Uncle Leo, and I don't think he smiled since 1924. And I figure his case is not like mine. But that really is the form, and you'll hear that from time to time. People say, yes, I drank too, but I stopped, I quit. And there's not much of an answer to that. Then there's another type of alcoholic, and they get not only drinking heavily, but they become physically addicted, physiologically addicted. And these are the people that many times need to be withdrawn medically, as Carolyn was, as hospitals, the Schick Shadell Hospital up in Seattle, very famous alcoholic hospital, but they preach a 7 to 10 day cure for alcoholism. But it's not the type of alcoholism I'm familiar with, or I don't suppose you are, but it's a type where you are physically addicted and you can't get off. They withdraw you and say, look what you're doing to yourself, and they say, wow, I'm not going to do that anymore. And that's a very relatively common thing. And then there's another type of alcoholic, of which unfortunately I'm a member, I suppose most of you are, where for one reason or another, either dramatic instance or withdrawal or just a desire, you stop drinking, and then you discover drinking wasn't your problem at all. And then eventually you're going to drink again. And pretty soon drinking gets to be a problem, but it's even more painful to not drink. And they say, alcohol is your problem. Maybe just for that guy that stopped, but not for me. And it becomes quite clear to me, as it did over the years, something that I filtered my mind, and I thought I was the only one who felt it. But I down deep knew my case is different. The universal cry of everybody who has this particular type of alcoholism. I've often thought I'd like to be the Betsy Ross of the alcoholics of my type, but I could design a flag that we could all gather under. And it wouldn't say, I need booze. It would just say, but you don't understand. We could all march on Washington and demand our rights. Except the way we are, we'd all wind up and say, here we are in Seattle, who do we talk to? But this strange combination of sobriety and drinking, which is such a baffling thing. I'll tell you how baffling it is. Today in AA, today in America, they have where there's more sobriety than any place in the history of the world. And there's ways to get sober. And there's AA meetings in practically every corner in the major cities. It is estimated about 95% of alcoholics still die drunk, or as a direct result of drinking. And they all go down, I'm sure, saying much the same thing. But you don't understand. I'm not really an alcoholic. My case is different. My problems come when I'm sober. These are real things. I drink to get a little relief, that's all, and the drinking got a lot of hand, and now you think it's alcohol. But you don't know. That's why people like me, and I'm sure others in the room, spend thousands of dollars, if you got it, on psychiatric couches, and talk to psychologists and psychiatrists, and read books, and do things, and yet nothing seems to help. And we wind up places like this, talking Just talking about the book, you know, the book has a funny line. We are people who would not ordinarily associate. I would say that's an understatement of the year, wouldn't you? I have dear friends today that some of them I wouldn't ever talk to if I had a choice, and some of them wouldn't talk to me. I mean, it's just, but here we all are. I was thinking about that with Carolyn tonight. She and I would never associate. I come from a highly religious home in northern Wisconsin. What good people. No whorehouses in our town. Why, my grandmother would slap me silly if she caught me talking to Carolyn. But on the other, you know, it's a funny thing. Raised in a small religious community and never could learn to sing little songs in Norwegian. And there's only two rules that I could figure out really. You don't sin, and you don't talk to Catholics, which seems reasonable if you want to go to heaven. And as I got older, I realized there's something, I just didn't realize it, but it became obvious there's something different about me, because I got sinning, then I got monking with Catholics, then I got sinning with Catholics, which was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And when I was 15, I was nervous and upset and didn't feel good, and the Second World War started, and I was 15, and I ran away from home. I hitchhiked to San Francisco, dumb little puke. It just scares me to think about it. Coming, Grandma. I'd always hoped I'd be called home in a meeting. Anyway. And I haven't been to any TV shows at all. No. Yes, I have. But I ran away, and I couldn't get in the Army or Navy. I was small, this big, and pimples, but I lied my age and got some Freeman's papers, and I was on a ship going to the South Pacific before my mother thought I was up in Superior visiting my aunt. And I was with some tough guys. These were tough guys. These merchant seamen, and I've often thought about that. You know, I don't want to offend anybody. It is kind of a funny thought. You can hardly pick up the paper anymore without finding some new child molestation case, or some new clergyman grabbing some kid, or somebody suing their father, or some hideous thing. And I think all that time, hitchhiking all the way across the country. Of course, I got to ride most of the way, but he was a tough old guy. And on a ship with some of the worst guys you've ever met. And I never was molested once. It makes you feel undesirable. But I'd led a very, very protected life up till then. And on that ship, I learned some things. I learned to smoke. I learned to curse a little bit. Somebody talked me into trying a drink of whiskey that I thought was just terrible. It made me vomit. They laughed at me, so I had to work very hard to, when nobody's around, take a drink of that. I hated it, throw it up, wipe it up. I wanted so much to be accepted. And one day I held a drink down the day before my 16th birthday. We're coming into Pearl Harbor. They're still digging up ships off the bottom. And I was just still dumb. And I held it down. And then I couldn't breathe, you know. And then all of a sudden something strange happened. I found myself feeling significantly better. And I didn't think about it, because that's, you know, I didn't become a terrible alcoholic. I got drunk. I remember, because I drank some beer in Honolulu that trip. And I drank some more once in a while. I got drunk. As the years went by, I tried to learn not to get drunk, not to drink. That makes me sick. Later on, I got another ship. When I got 17, I was in the Navy. In the Navy, I was in the Naval Hospital up in Northern California, being sewed together, and they passed around some tests. I've always been good on tests, so I did very well on it. They gave me a high school diploma. And I've often been very grateful for that, because if I hadn't done that, I'd have had to go back to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They'd want me to start my junior year of high school again. And I was much too worldly wise by now to do that. But then I went to college after the war, in the first class of veterans. It was a lively time in American education, because first and last time, millions of people all got out of the service at once, and they all had the GI Bill. And if they had nothing much to do, you could go to college and get paid for it. So a lot of you sit in college, just colleges all had higher barracks and rooms, and I went to a 50-year reunion of our beginning class a couple of years ago in Wisconsin. And you think, why would you have a beginning class instead of a graduating class? Because most of them never graduated. It's good to see them all. But you go to freshman, I remember going to freshman English class, there'd be some old 45-year-old ex-Marine sergeant sitting there next to some little girl just out of Black River Falls High School. Were you in the war? Yeah, do you put out? Culture shock. When we went to college, we drank and had a good time and used our veteran status as much as we could. You know, you don't have your term paper in, Mr. Imislund. Well, I had it about done, Professor, but I got thinking about some of my experiences over there. Oh, I understand. We'll give you a couple more days. Thanks, you dumb shit. And we all played games and had a good time and drank a lot. And I met a girl in college who had pure black hair and black flashing eyes. You don't see those very often in the Norwegian Lutheran community. And she won my heart, and it turned out she was a Catholic. And I struggled against her charms, but she won over and we got married. And I'm out in the world. I became a sports writer, newspaper sports writer, which still is the job I like best of all the jobs I've ever had. But then my wife began manifesting the behavior patterns of Catholics. You know, and they never tell Lutheran boys about this, but if you marry a Catholic, you're about to have a big family, whether you plan on it or not. And I became a national distributor of small Catholics, just boom. So I had to keep getting better jobs. I got into advertising and public relations, worked around the country. And all these years I drank, and I didn't think much about it. I drank, got in trouble sometime, but that was part of being the bizarre life. And smoked. I learned to smoke on that ship. I smoked 2.5 or 3 packs a day every day for 40-some years. Until I realized I was going bald. I had to stop. They took out 1/3 of my vocal cords also, but that was a funny thing. The doctor told me for 5 years, he said, Clancy, you've got to stop smoking. It's going to kill you. Yeah. Then he took out part of my vocal cords. He says, if you don't stop smoking, you're going to go mute. But it's really kind of funny now. I'm still a smoker by nature. I'm still a smoker deep in my heart. And it hurts me to drive down the street and see outside of all buildings huddled little figures in rain or cold. Oh, they should have carrying a bell saying, unclean, unclean. And not only that, but people are aggressively attacking smokers, and I hate that. They were doing it at the end of my smoking. I stopped smoking in 1985, I guess. But I'd already been accosted a couple times by people saying, why do you smoke? I couldn't think of an answer. I have an answer now, and I couldn't use it, and I used it a couple times. For all of you smokers, I'm going to give you an answer. It's the only AA meeting in the world tonight that you would get this kind of information, so I want you to cherish it. If you will answer this word for word to that question, they will never ask you again. Say, why do you smoke? You say, well, I'll tell you why. I have a feeling that one of these days they'll find a market for phlegm and I'll be rich. And then what they say is, oh, how gross. But I kept drinking. My drinking got a little bit worse. I couldn't control it quite so well. I got sent to AA when I was 22 because I already was a bizarre drinker, but I had no identification with these people. But I went to AA from then on over the years because whenever the heat was on, I'd go to AA, and AA wasn't very well known in the 1950s, and I'd go there and hold a job for a while longer, do something. And I went to AA and I saw these guys, and I don't know what I heard in those years. I'm sure I heard some good things, but I look back at my mind and I get a mental picture of, I'm sure newcomers get the same feeling now. Sitting in a meeting with a bunch of guys and some guy says, I stayed drunk around the clock for 20 years. One day I walked through that door and they told me to put the plug in the jug. And I did. And I've just never been so goddamn happy. You feel like saying, why don't you tell your face? You know. But the main problem with AA is this. It deals with people's drinking. And that's why I know my case is different. That's why people like us go through lives absolutely convinced. The last day I drank, I was in a situation that a person of my background and intelligence and ability cannot be in. Two big guys threw me out of the midnight mission down on Skid Row in Los Angeles. I didn't even know anybody here. No, you don't have to leave. I'll get out. And the guy said, and why don't you stay out of here, you damn bum? I tried to explain to him, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I helped write, the old L.C. and Elmer ads for the Borden Company, were running that very week in Life and Time and Inserting Post. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times for one of their achievements? But it's hard to explain these things in midair. But I stood outside that mission on a cold, drizzly morning. If someone came up to me and said, you know, I want to help you, could you tell me why you drink? I probably would tell them to keep your nose out of my business. But if I had made an effort to tell them, if I were in a psychiatric mood, I could tell them about the outgrowth of my psychiatric investigations and all the knowledge I'd gained about how I'd been a victim most of my life. I'd been hurt by people. I wasn't sufficiently nurtured. My parents were not sufficiently nurturing to me. I'd gone away to sea too early. I'd gotten in bad situations. It's never been my fault. Or if I were in one of my psychological moods, I could talk about the Nietzschean problems I had of being a world of insanity and disorder and wanting things to be right. And the one thing I wouldn't have told him, because I wouldn't have ever thought of it, is the reason that it was probably correct. Because it made me feel like something I wasn't when I was sober. It did something that changed my perception of reality. Because the reality I had without it was untenable. Because people like me in those years I always secretly knew it. There's something missing in me. I don't know what it is, but somewhere along the line I missed it. Maybe it's due to that psychiatric problems I had that the doctor told me about. Or there's something I'm afraid, I have a lot of fear. I have to keep up front. I don't want people to realize how weak I am and how I can't really do it, because I can get by if I keep being slick and hip and cool. And I am sensitive to things. I want to pretend I'm not sensitive, because sensitive people, I don't like sensitive people. They're wussies and they're nothing. And and when I drink, that all changes. Most of the time. Sometimes it does, but most of the time, I feel like I'm something. And sometimes I feel like I'm more than something. Just great. It's great. After being a wussy all day, it's so great to be something at night. And to have the feeling that I'm not afraid anymore. I fight cops. I jump off balconies of swimming pools. I do exotic things. And I like to be around people who have the same sense of drama. When I'm in a bar late at night in El Paso, somebody says, let's go to Juarez! I want to be with people who say, yeah, yeah! I don't want to be a bunch of people who say, why? It's so late. What'll I tell Phyllis? Tell her to keep you home, you puke. You know. I want to be with people who understand color, colorful living. And I get in trouble sometimes when I drink, as you might imagine. I've been in jail a lot of times. No big time, overnight, all for mouthing off to cops or fighting or some dumb thing. And so, a long time ago, in the mid-1950s, I guess, I started trying to find ways to bring about the change without paying the tremendous tab I started paying. Somebody losing jobs sometimes because I'd be in such a state I'd get in a beef with somebody, or I'd get into trouble, or I wouldn't show up to work and screw them. I can get another job because I was a good writer. I could always get another job. And I look back now, and I had read the book Alcoholics Anonymous in 1949 because somebody said, you ought to read this, it'll help you. And I read it, and it didn't help me at all. Just a well-written, not even a well-written, a mediocrely written problem for people who need Jesus or something, not for me. I know about Jesus. If he's looking for me, I'm in trouble. And I look back now and I think, I read chapter 3, and I thought, I guess like everything else, I read after I was sober this time. It meant nothing to me. I hear it read at meetings. And I look back down and realized chapter 3 is the exact delineation of my life. If I would have had the objectivity to be able to see it. And at most lives, there are rooms like this. It talks about something we all have in common. What do we all have in common? We all got drunk and get into jail? Nah. We all drank whiskey till we were crazy? No. We all been to nut houses? No. We all lost our families? No. What we all have in common, among other few things, is we've all been consumed with the obsession that somehow, someday, I will control and enjoy my drinking. And it says the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. And everybody in this room knows about it. Because why would you persist in this desire and never once understanding, you should understand after a while, just empiric observation, that sometimes I can control it, but then I don't enjoy it. And sometimes I enjoy it, but then I don't control it. And yet I keep thinking I can control and enjoy it. It's almost, I look back at my life, it's like it's like playing Russian roulette. When you're young, there's 5 empty chambers and 1 full. When you click, ha 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 ha, click, ha ha ha, let's go out again tomorrow night, click, boom, Jesus. Not going out on Thursdays anymore, yeah. But as the years go by, somebody keeps filling the chambers, boom, Jesus, boom, boom, there's a click in there somewhere, God damn it, boom, on and on. And that's the persistence of the illusion that someday, it says we have occasional brief recoveries. And we've all had occasional brief recoveries where you think, maybe I got together, I'll remember to eat before I go out, or this and that. Followed always by still worse relapse. If we hadn't, none of us would be here tonight. We'd still be on that recovery. And you find you drink until you what? To get to a stage of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Tasty words, those. I used to think that's how drunk you get. Not at all. That's how you feel after you're sobered up. You're back to a feeling of pitiful and incomprehensible. And they want explanations for your behavior from you, and I can't even find one that satisfies me. But I had to give them one. But you hang in there, and pretty soon no matter how bad it feels, Mother Nature puts scabs over memories. There's a thing called dynamic memory in human beings that has the tendency to soften unpleasant memories and enhance pleasant memories. That's why everybody can talk about the good old days 20 years ago, because you remember the good things and you forget the bad parts of it. We all know that. But little by little, it'll get a little better. And then pretty soon it starts to get uncomfortable again. And then people like me, at the last part of that chapter that we read, I think, I bet I could do this if I changed from scotch to brandy. If I drank beer only. If I only drank at home, perhaps. If I never drank at home. If I take physical exercise. If I could read some spiritual literature. If I could swear off. If I could take a voluntary commitment to some hospital and get off it. And on and on. That whole chapter of things in chapter 3. Whole paragraph of things. At the bottom there's a very definitive line that says, we could increase this list ad infinitum, which means forever. And everyone in this room has tried that. Maybe if I tried this, if I tried that. Now, why would people try that? Only one reason. Because sobriety is untenable, and I have to have something to break it. And drinking is getting to be untenable, and I can't do it. There's got to be a combination there somewhere. Never knowing there isn't any combination. And you may go to places like AA, and they mean well, but they want you to go to return to God, maybe. Tonight we heard a lot of talk about God from this podium, and truthfully, and well meant. But if you're cynical and feeling bitter and lost, you may wonder, is this just another religious dodge? I know when I came here the last time, if somebody told me I'd have to believe in God, I'd be dead. I remember talking to a guy who became my sponsor. I was living in an abandoned car in the A Club parking lot at the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax, and I'd lost everything I had, including some guy had kicked out my front teeth in the Phoenix jail, so I didn't really have it going for me as well as I should. And then I got a sponsor who used to say, "Now, Clancy!" Remember, that's the only time I really missed my front teeth. Ah! But I didn't want to give him the pleasure of gumming it. He says, "Listen," and he'd tell me things. And I remember talking to him. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to affect that meeting because I'm not going to return to God. I'm not going to return. I just can't return to God. If God exists, I'm damned. I prefer to believe Nietzsche said God is dead. I don't want to hear about God. He said, "Why don't you just read the black parts of the page for a while? It never says you return to God." Oh, return to a power greater than yourself. I bet that fools a lot of idiots. It doesn't fool me. He says it never says that at all. He says, "Why don't you read it?" It says you come to believe in something. Nothing in AA ever asks you to return to anything, because that's going back to sick perceptions of reality. You try to come to believe in something. Can't you believe in God? No. Can you believe in AA? No. He says, "You think I'm doing better than you are?" Yeah. He says, "Congratulations, I'm your new higher power." And he became my higher power. And I could accept that, because he couldn't send me to hell. Close. But people used to say things like, "See that guy who thinks his sponsor is God." I didn't think my sponsor was God, but I chose my higher power. And I'll tell you this, if you're new and having difficulty with God, I would much rather see you believe in your sponsor that you believe in than to pretend to believe in a God that you don't believe in. Because it's easy to fool about 7:30 at night on Sunday night or 8 o'clock, but you can't fool the dark at 2 in the morning. And you better have something you can believe in there that you can turn to. And I tell you, my sponsor, I did things to win his approval. I wasn't aware of it, but I respected him. I didn't much like him. I felt he could see through me, and I hated that because I knew he'd know I was weak and I was phony. The kind of people I liked were people who liked me. That's the kind of people I liked. I thought they were stupid. I had no respect for them because they were simpletons, but I liked them. And this guy could see through me and made me uncomfortable. He intimidated me. I hear people sometimes say, "Oh, my sponsor intimidates me." You're lucky, because it gives you just a little edge on your performance. "Hi there." Instead of, "Oh, hello, Fred, you back again, you asshole." You know, I want to have some little intimidation factor to me. And I did things to win his approval. And I would have done for my job, for my wife, for my children, for my mother. And good job, kid. Thanks. I had no hopes of ever becoming anything again. But little by little, his actions that he had me take were actions I had never taken before, because I'm intelligent enough to realize the actions that don't apply to me I shouldn't take. And you come around AA and you read this stuff and you memorize it and you write my insights about myself and get drunk again and come back and read some more and write. And my sponsor pointed out to me, it's the actions you take. A couple of years ago I was talking in Toronto and a woman said, there's a question and answer thing, and she said, "To what, in all your 10 years of slipping, and now you're 40 years of sobriety, or at that time 38 years. What would you say is the major difference? And I could, in a sentence or two, and I could not think of an answer. And I was taking a shower that night before the meeting. I thought of an answer, and it is the kind of answer I like. Wouldn't want to tell you about it because it's a two-bit little answer. It's a yuck. I like dramatic thoughts. I would like to have the new people tonight say, "Did you hear what that man said? Wet birds don't fly at night." Or, "Did you hear what that man said? Never mind if the horse is blind, keep loading the wagon." They mean nothing, but they give the newcomer hope. And the answer I came up with was this. This was the first time I had reached a stage of emotional desperation where I began to take actions that I didn't agree with and I thought were stupid. I'd never sold out my integrity before. And I sold out my integrity this time, and that's when, much to my surprise, the change began to happen. It didn't. Not anything noticeable for a long time, but it happened. And as I said, now it's been 40 years. And the only therapy I've had is Alcoholics Anonymous since 1958. And I did see a psychiatrist a couple times a week for a couple of years because I sponsored him. I wanted to go to them, do those two meetings. And he moved out of town. That helped me a little bit. Took a little load off my back. But all these years, all I've done is do the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you something else. I'm sure a lot of people forget this, but the steps are not some isolated thing that you sit and work on and do and think about the steps and work on the steps. They are guideposts to ways of living. You know, if you're living relatively comfortable, if you're watching how you act, if you behave reasonably well, that's what's called doing the steps. If you make mistakes, to apologize for admit you're wrong, to do the things. But it isn't a continual self-obsession. I hear that people talk about how they're on the steps all the time. Bill Wilson was never like that. Dr. Bob was never like that. I may be the only person in this room who ever sat and had the opportunity to sit down and talk to Bill Wilson. And I asked him about that in 1963. He said, no, the steps are designed so that you should be living your life so you don't even have to think about them. And I said, oh. About 20 years later, I understood what he meant. But it's a funny thing, you know. One good thing about being sober a long time ago is that in 1960, I wish you all could have been here. The International Convention was in Long Beach. And Ebby Thatcher gave his only talk he ever gave at a convention. Had Bill Wilson sponsor. The first meeting, Lois Wilson talk, Sister Ignatia talk, Bill Wilson talk. I was so impressed it turned my life around for about 5 days. But all of the information you get that way means nothing. You could be inspired, you could have all these great things happen to you, but still you get back to life. Because the nature of the problem here must be addressed or you must certainly fail. And the problem here, as you must have guessed by now, is not alcohol. If it were alcohol, detoxes would turn out recovered people. Treatment centers would turn out recovered people. 12th step houses would turn out recovered people. They turn out sober people. But I'll tell you something. If they be of my type of alcoholic, and I presume yours, or as our book says, Bill Wilson didn't know about the gradations of alcoholism when he wrote the book, but he had an intuitive feeling. So that's why he keeps talking about our type of alcoholic. He didn't know what the others were, but he knew there were others not like him. And it's certainly true. But people like us have got to understand the problem here is something called alcoholism, which sounds the same as alcohol, except it's a lot different. An alcohol problem was overcome by stopping your drinking and making a decision to stop and shaping up. In alcoholism, which looks the same to the naked eye and unfortunately looks the same usually to the patient himself, and lethally so, this perception distorting, mind consuming, bodily eroding, eventually fatal thing called alcoholism. I can't tell you how many alcoholics I've known that have died from it, swearing they're not alcoholic. This thing, you'll discover getting sober and cleaning up your act, has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. And that is what makes alcoholism fatal. If getting sober was the answer, we'd all be home free. But eventually, as we all know, reality gets more and more full of conflict and pain and memory and what if and resentment and loneliness and despair and feelings of difference and not enough. And I know that right there, I can change it. And I'll try to fight it, but the time comes I just can't go anymore. This book says there seems to be a time at which there is no adequate defense against the first drink. And everybody in this room knows what that moment is. And you drink and you're sorry you have to drink it, but Jesus, what a difference. Then one day you're drinking again, and you're in trouble. People say, why did you drink? I don't know, leave me alone. Keep your nose out of my business. Butt out, son of a bitch. And never know. And in my work today, I see people like you and me die from alcoholism. And I'm a pretty good communicator. I travel all over the world to talk about alcoholism. Last few years I've been from Cape Town to Oslo to Berlin to Ireland to England to this summer I was in Australia and New Zealand. I go all over the world. Because I'm a good communicator. You think I should be able to talk to some guy dying of alcoholism in front of me whose body I step over on my way to work? And I might as well talk to the wall. I think, what the hell is wrong with this guy? And I have to stop and think all those years, year after year, when good men tried to help me, I said, yeah. You don't understand. Because the door has to open from the inside. There's nobody, you can't unlock that door from the outside. You can hopefully persuade sometimes people to unlock it. But if you're afraid, and most of us come here afraid and feeling terrible and alienated, only you don't want people to know it, so you have to put on a big front. They talk about the egotism of newcomers. Newcomers don't have any egotism. They got fear. They put up a wall to disguise it. And that's why we're here, because sometimes when we share, you can get a little feeling of, oh my God, I understand that. All my life, people have been saying to me, oh, Clancy, I know how you feel. And he's, no, you don't. I don't say it, but I feel like saying, no, you don't know how I feel. Nobody else knows how I feel. God damn it, that's what's wrong. And yet, if you're kind of new and you stay around here and take some of the actions here, maybe ask someone whom you respect, you don't have to like him, someone you respect, and follow some actions, whether you seem stupid or not. One day, some old fool is going to come over to you and say, I know how you feel. You say, my God, he does know how I feel. And that's the first rope across the chasm. Then there's more ropes. One day have a little footpath across there. One day have a little road. One day have an 8-lane superhighway. And I'm absolutely convinced today I am like every alcoholic in the world. I've come to believe that. I've watched it happen so many times. I've listened to over 200 inventories. And I'll tell you, they're all the same from all kinds of people. Different specifics, but always the same underlying emotions. And yet, it doesn't make any difference. If I start not remembering these things, and if I start failing to take these actions and get carried away with my wisdom about AA, and I've watched this happen to a lot of people, I can little by little start cutting the lines again. And that goes down to a road again, and one day to a little footpath, and one day it's a rope, and one day I'm back there alone, and I say, what's the use? I already know about AA, that can't help me, I have deep problems. I watched my sponsor, the man who taught me that for 15 years of sobriety, did that, got drunk. And I used to coax him, I said, Jesus, Bob, come on, he said, don't tell me about AA, I told you about it, keep your nose up, you don't understand this. And then I got another sponsor. What I did, I picked up the most active man in Alcoholics Anonymous I could find. I didn't much like him because he was too smarmy, I thought. But he was the most active man. He pulled me along for the next 20-odd years. And he never once told me what to do. My first sponsor, but he showed me what to do, and I did it. And I had to do things to get his approval the same way. He said, I'm not going to do things for people's approval. Well, you sure as hell better. I was thinking the night when Carolyn said, I enjoyed much of her talk, but the one statement, if you're new, she mentioned a sign that says, be yourself. Jesus, don't do that. You know. I did that so often it made me crazy. You got to do better than be yourself. You got to have, and you don't know what to do, so you got to allow someone to superimpose actions over your perception. Then AA begins to work. Then you start to feel good. I've lived relatively comfortably now for a lot of years. For for the last 25, I got somewhat successful again in advertising and broadcasting in Los Angeles and television, and did quite well. Another guy and I created something called Boss Radio, became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said things like, "What's coming on down, baby?" And now for the past 25 years, I run the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people say, "Why would you give up this tremendous career to run a mission?" And I've never been able to think of an answer to that. Well, it was such a significant change in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. I want to say one more thing before I sit down, because there's some new people here. You might think, isn't that wonderful? This old man runs a mission. He's given up his life to run this mission on Skid Row. I'm not there because I'm a good man. Tomorrow morning when I get up, I drive down the Santa Monica Freeway. My car still wants to get off in Beverly Hills. Get back there! I want to go to my office on Robertson where I could go upstairs and pretty girls in tight sweaters would say, "Here's your coffee, Mr. Imislund. Anything else?" Not now, Monica. There. Sorry. This was Monica Schwartz, and nobody you knew. Anyway, but instead I'll drive downtown. I'll go to my office. I'll see who smashed their head into the sidewalk over the weekend, who stabbed whom in the food line in some drunken sickness, who is sold out for a little shot of crack cocaine, the new drug of choice on Skid Row. Lethal, poor bastards. And but when I go home tomorrow night, I would hope, as it all usually does, when I leave there, I will feeling more complete than I ever did going down all those elevators in Beverly Hills, popping my fingers and being hip and slick and cool. And it isn't a treatment center. We're way below that. We're just trying to keep people alive, you know. And we don't have any alcoholic treatment or anything. It's just trying to get them to find some desire to stay alive. Now, if you're new tonight, I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Even if you get a sponsor, even if you go to meetings, even if you try to work these steps and try to do these things, we can't guarantee you that in 15 years you could have your own mission. There's only so many go around. I got mine, and that's for you. But we can guarantee you that you will walk through the streets with a degree of dignity you would not think possible. And you won't have to worry about people seeing through you, because you're going to not see things that you're ashamed of anymore. And you can live with some degree of peace. And when that day comes, it's worth everything it took. Thank you.